So welcome back to episode 2 of common paramotoring mistakes. And in this episode, we're talking about pre-flight checks. So common mistake that pretty much everyone has made is doing either very little or no weather check. Okay, and just looking out the window and go, it's flyable. Or seeing someone on Instagram, they're flying now, rush, and they don't bother checking the weather. They don't see how strong that wind is, what's going to change, whether it's even flyable in their own location. Okay, so double, triple, quadruple check your weather before you go flying. Which apps are you going to use? As many as possible. I like to look at the synoptic charts first to get an overall picture, and then I like to look at Windfinder or Windy, and there's also a few other more technical apps such as Meteo Parapont, Meteo Blue, which give you an even better breakdown as to what the winds are doing at different altitudes and what the thermals are doing. That's much more focused towards paragliding. However, it's also very useful for paramotor pilots as well. Next thing is going to be airspace. Are we legal? Okay, and that might change. Just because you've flown from a site before does not mean that it is now suddenly under temporary flight restriction or a NOTAM. So you need to double, triple, quadruple check that your airspace is legal. Okay, for the app that I use is SkyDemon. SkyDemon I think is a great app. It is more expensive than Gaggle, but I find it easier to check what the airspace is at lots of different altitudes, and also to check the NOTAMs, and it even gives you in-flight information as to what the wind's doing at certain altitudes, and it's very easy to plot a navigational route and follow that. So another common mistake is actually judging yourself. So human performance limitations. Have you had enough rest? Did you go and hang one on last night, and have you woken up with a terrible hangover? How are you mentally? All of these things you need to actually assess before you go and fly. So if you're not hydrated, if you haven't had a pee before you've gone for a flight, if other aspects of your life are not working out as you wish, is it sensible for you to go and fly? So double check yourself. And I haven't got an app for that, I'm afraid. Site assessments. This is something which is commonly overlooked by a lot of pilots, and it's very easy. You need to actually assess that you can take off and land safely without jeopardizing anyone else in the site. Now this site's huge, it's ideal, it's on the coast, we have a nice sea breeze. However, it still comes with its risks which need to be managed. We need to park the vehicles well off site, so there's not any opportunity for any pilot to fly into on takeoff or landing those vehicles. Likewise, we need to ensure that we're not taking off into rota, or we're not taking off into an area where it's going to be dangerous should they have an engine failure. Yet again, we also need to manage the human element, so make sure that the people, whether they are part of your flying group or not, are correctly managed. Likewise with animals. So all of these things need to be thought about, okay, and managed correctly, because it's a very, very common mistake which people continue to make. Pre-flight checks. We've made a separate video which you can see up here somewhere, and that will take you through the paramotor checks. You also need to check out your wing, okay, make sure that as you unfold it, or if there's a bit of a breeze as you inflate it, you are checking that the wing is correct, there's no damage to it. You can also check the lines. Yet again, there'll be another video somewhere for us to link you to check that out. So with the engine, make sure that, as I've already mentioned in a previous video, the fuel is mixed and it's not old, and you do a proper thorough check to ensure that your equipment is safe. Very commonly overlooked, and we've all been guilty of it. Common mistake with pre-flight is people are not checking their actual wing as well. So you want to pre-flight check your trimmers. Okay, make sure that they are set in the correct position. For example, in Ozone Roadster 3, there's a red stitch. If you go beyond that, you're into the reflex system. I personally like to take off when it's on the white stitch, on probably the first white stitch from full slow. Okay, sometimes I'll go between white stitch 1 and white stitch 2, and then I know that the wing is going to inflate and not hang back, but also have a nice amount of speed during my takeoff procedure. A common mistake people make is over-shortening their brake lines. I know this isn't necessarily a pre-flight thing, but you definitely want to assess that you have the right brake travel, and this is why ground handling is so important, because if you do over-shorten your brake lines, it's a very good idea to pre-flight check that wing for real without the engine. So inflate and make sure you now know that your brake line, where your brake line tension point is. Okay, because if you've shortened them by 2 or 3 inches, it's going to totally change the dynamic and the responsiveness of your wing. And what you don't want is to have the muscle memory of the old brake line length and suddenly find you are much closer to the stall or spin point because you haven't ground handled and haven't readjusted to this new brake pressure. Another common paramotoring mistake pre-flight and then also during flight is how you use the radio properly. Now, it's very important that you've charged it up, obviously. However, as you can see, this has been secured using the leash around this chest strap, and it's also got this coil here. We don't want to stuff the radio into a pocket because that's going to cause the radio, once he runs, to potentially get dislodged or change channel. If once he's taken off, he's no longer hearing the radio, it's more often than not his radio that's the problem. Okay, so he's going to have to now turn it off, turn it back on, make sure he hears the channel number correctly. The good thing about these Baofeng radios, they do tell you, please change battery. However, the other things that can happen is they could be pressing on the side of the pressel here. So a lot of these things need to be adjusted or checked just to ensure that this radio is not transmitting or it's not come loose during the takeoff procedure. Okay, so have a good understanding of your comms system and all the problems that could exist so that you can rectify them and stay in communication. As part of your pre-flight checks, you then need to warm up the engine. Before you do so, ensure you have full and free movement of the throttle. Okay, what a lot of people make the mistake of not adjusting their cruise control, and now they suddenly find that they've gone straight to full power. And that is why we start these engines up on our back, because the worst case scenario is you're going to go face first into the ground. It's very unlikely that this prop is going to be able to harm you or anyone else if you started up in the right place. However, if you started up on the ground and it's gone full power, you're never going to be able to brace this. And that's why we want to avoid losing our fingers. Now, imagine we've clipped in, we've checked our equipment, we now are about to take off. Before we take off, we're going to do a 6-point check. Yet again, easily forgotten, but in this case, it's going to be leg strap, chest or waist strap, carabiner, and then helmet. Okay, make sure all of these buckles and carabiners and straps are done up correctly. We can then do a radio check, okay, should we have one, and be communicating with each other. And then before we actually go, it's always a good idea to check your reserve. Now we're going to get our throttle, we're going to turn the engine on. So clear prop, make sure there's no one behind us. Okay, engine's already been warmed up. We're now going to get our, imagine we're doing a forward launch, we're going to have toggles, we're going to come underneath and take our A-lines, okay? And before we go anywhere, we're going to make sure in the center of our wing, the wind hasn't changed, and we're going to make sure our airspace is clear, okay? And now we're ready to take off. Imagine we haven't flown for a long time, which is a very common case in the UK because the weather's crap and we're not current. This sport is based on muscle memory, and if you've not done it for say 3, 4, 5 months, you might be a bit rusty. Where people get very complacent is ground handling. There is absolutely no reason for any pilot to think that they've done enough ground handling. You can never do enough. So before you decide to actually go and fly for the first time in X number of months, chuck a harness on, get the wing out, and do some ground handling. Warm up your muscle memory. One of the things I like to do is actually simulate what I'm doing on the ground. So I walk through the whole takeoff sequence, and I particularly do this if I am flying equipment which I'm not used to, or trike, which I don't fly very often. So if I'm going to be flying a trike, for example, I will actually, on the ground, I'll simulate in my head and walk through exactly what that procedure is going to be. And I'll also simulate my emergency procedures. If the wing going off to one side, I'm going to be simulating killing the engine, okay, or correcting the wing and gradually steering with the front foot. So this is more of my advice to you rather than the common mistake, but I would suggest highly that you get yourself mentally prepared as well for your forthcoming takeoff. So there are many things which I could add to this video. No doubt you guys are going to want to contribute, so by all means leave some comments below, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say.